Okay, welcome to the third video on Aristotle and the soul and knowledge. So let's return now back to our original question. What can human beings know? How is it that Aristotle is going to answer this? So his focus is on human beings and the human soul, right? And now he wants to know, well, how is it that these forms or species that are first found in the world get imported into my mind? How is it that this form that's in the sun gets imported into my mind such that I can have a representation of the sun? And so how is it that the sun and my representation of the sun can share this form even though they differ in their matter? The sun is a fiery ball of gas, and my representation of the sun is some mental thing, right? Something in my mind. Well, Aristotle's answer is going to be that there's a kind of, that I have a kind of equipment, right? There's something about my mind that makes it so that I can take in these forms. I have a kind of mental equipment. And these bits of mental equipment that allow me to take in and process forms from the outside world, we're going to call those faculties. So a faculty is a bit of mental equipment that allows me to take in information from the world and process it. And so these are going to be the different capacities, right? The different potentialities that my mind has to do different things with the representations in my mind. So they're going to be indicative of the different things that I can learn, the different things that I can imagine, the different things that I can desire, right? Those are all going to be indicative of different faculties. So what are our basic faculties or capacities? Are different bits of basic mental equipment according to Aristotle? Well, as you know very intimately well, I'm sure, we have a whole bunch of them, right? I mean, there are going to be faculties for thinking, for seeing, for tasting, for touching, for hearing, for desiring, for moving, for willing, for remembering, for fantasizing, yes. All of those are going to be different kinds of capacities or faculties that we have. And so some of these are going to end up being faculties for, or capacities for doing things. And some of them are going to be faculties for learning things or for coming to know things about the world. So let's set to one side the faculties for doing things, because doing things depends on knowing things about the world, right? And so examples of our faculties for doing things are going to be things like our faculty for moving our bodies, or our faculties for desiring food, for, you know, wanting to eat pizza, right? That's going to be a kind of capacity for doing things. Those are going to be related to doing. And we're going to set those to one side and focus on those faculties or capacities of our mind that contribute to representing how things are. So representing or what there is in the world, right? So we want to know, how do we know what there is? How do we represent what's in the world? Well, Aristotle is going to divide the human faculties of soul, the faculties of soul that are found in us, into three parts, these representing faculties. So now that we've carved off the doing, and we're not going to pay attention to those, and we're just focused on these guys, the faculties for representing how things are, there are going to be three different parts that Aristotle is going to carve those up to. It's going to be the sense, or our senses, our imagination, or our fantasia in Greek. That's the Greek term, fantasia, or the intellect. And the intellect is going to go under a couple different names. You'll call it the understanding, reason, the faculty for thinking, the faculty for concepts, the faculty for judgments, the faculty for reasoning, the faculty for inferring, the faculty for syllogizing. All of that's going to be the intellect. All of that's going to fall under the intellect. And notice our faculty of sense is going to take in sensible forms or species, whereas our faculty of imagination is going to be for taking in, have as its object images or phantasms. So sense, there are sensible forms or species. That's the object of sense. So the representations that the senses have are sensible species. The representations that the imagination has are images or phantasms, and the representations that the intellect has are going to be concepts and beliefs, or what get called intelligible forms or species. And there's a division between the lower faculties and the higher, in that all animals will have the lower. So all will have the lower, but only human beings will have the higher, right? So the lower are what we share with other non-rational animals, and those will include sense and imagination. But the intellect, that's particular to human beings, according to Aristotle. So what are the senses, the imagination, and the intellect? Well, in the first instance, with the senses, Aristotle has in mind the five senses: touch, hearing, taste, sight. Am I missing one? Touch, taste, hearing, sight, smell, right? Smell, there we go. He's going to then draw a distinction between proper and common sensibles. What are the proper and common sensibles? Well, this is really going to come out in a passage from 418a, 7 to 25. And that's On the Soul, Book 1, Chapter 6. And we're going to want to look at this in some detail in the next video, but just as a first pass, a proper available to one sense. So color is only available to sight, or sounds are only available to hearing, or sweet is only available to taste. But the common sensibles, those are available to more than one sense. So the motion and rest of, bodies, of things in the world, of physical things that take up space, right, that move around, I can see that, and I can also touch it, right? Or their shape. I can see the shape of my water bottle, but I can also pick it up and feel it. Or similarly with number and magnitude, right? So those are common sensibles because they're common to many senses, whereas the proper sensibles are proper to one sense. We'll come back to this in the next video. Imagination is going to be the capacity to bring images to mind of things that are not there. So the senses are for sensing things that are presently in front of us, right? So they have to be there, the things that we're sensing. But the imagination is going to be a capacity to bring those same things that we sensed to mind now when we're not seeing them, when they're not in front of us. And the imagination is going to divide into two parts. So there's going to be the capacity for fantasizing and the capacity for memory. But they're both going to be parts of the imagination because they're both going to be capacities to bring images to mind of things that are not there. So I could, for example, be fantasizing about the eggplant parmesan that I'm going to have for dinner, or fantasizing about my lunch tomorrow, the sandwich that I'm going to eat after teaching. And that's fantasizing about something that's not yet happened. But there's also memory, right? So when I was a kid, in third grade, there was this guy, Bobby Brewster, and he was a bit of a bully, and he would always pick on me when I was in third grade, and we got into a fight, and he punched me in the gut, right? And so I can remember the feeling of Bobby Brewster punching me in the gut. Not there now, right? Bobby Brewster isn't punching me right now, but I can remember that, and so that's going to be another part of my imagination, because I can remember it and it's not there. And then the third faculty of the soul that's related to representing how things are is the intellect. And the intellect is sort of the most complex of the three. And there are really going to be three parts to the intellect. There's going to be the power to know or believe, and the power to form concepts of things, and the power to draw inferences. There's really three capacities, and we'll call these knowledge or belief judgments. So I judge that the table is brown. I believe it or I know it. And so there's a capacity for concepts, judgments, and inferences. And with the intellect, in my power to know or believe, I mean, that's in a way there's a broad and a narrow sense of the power to believe, and in the broad sense of the power to believe, it's going to encompass all three: concepts, judgments, and inferences. Why? Well, because we use concepts, judgments, and inferences to know things, to believe things, right? And with this power to know or believe, it's a power to abstract away from this or that particular sensation or memory or fantasy about a sensation, this or that particular image. And remember, images or notes, I guess, we haven't talked about it, but images here might not refer to, like, the shapes, like the image of a circle, right? They might not be like that. Rather, images has a broader sense where it's just related to the imagination, right? So it's anything, any phantasm that can be in the imagination, any representation in the imagination, and that might be the memory of a smell, the memory of a taste, the memory of a feeling, like being touched, the memory of a color. All of those are going to be images, or the memory of a sound. So images in this sense is going to be broader than what we usually mean by image, right? Image, as we usually mean it, is something very narrow. It only applies to visual things, and this is going to apply to all five senses. Now, going back to the intellect, so thinking about the power to know or believe, it's going to be a power to abstract away from this or that particular image or sensible quality of a thing and think about things in general, right? So to think about dogs in general, or cows in general, right? not talking about this or that particular dog or this or that particular cow. I'm talking about dogs or cows in general. And so there's no particular sensation of a dog or a cow that I have in mind. Okay. So one thing that I want to ask you guys when we next meet is about why imagination, why isn't imagination a sensible form or an opinion? So how is it that Aristotle is distinguishing imagination from sensible forms or opinions? Maybe the final thing that I'll leave you with before ending this video is that we get through this whole hierarchy by beginning with what's in the senses, right? There's nothing in the intellect that wasn't first in the senses. And so everything sort of begins with sensible forms. And then if we remember those or fantasize about possible future sensible forms, so we take those sensible forms and we copy them in the imagination, then we're going to get phantasms. And then if we copy those phantasms in a certain way, leaving out what's particular to them and form these general representations, well, then we're going to get to the intelligible forms. And so sensible forms, phantasms, and intelligible forms are all forms of objects, right? So they're like the form of the sun in that they're traceable back to what comes through the senses, right? So there's my sensory, right? I sense the sun, and then so there's the sensation, and then I remember what the sun looked like, and I form an image, right? A phantasm, and then through comparing this image of the sun to another image of the sun to another image of the sun, I might form the concept of the sun that's separate from all of the various sensations and images that I've had of the sun in the past. And so that's how I get to the concept or the general idea, sun. So we're going to want to investigate these ideas in much more detail. This is just sort of a first pass. And in the next video, we'll turn in particular to the object